So I'm listening to those sheep and I'm trying to work out which field they're in. They could be in the field on the other side of the river, in which case they might be being disturbed by that the guy who he stopped here on the way to going to the river to fish, which I'm not entirely sure he's allowed to be fishing there, or if he's a member of that club, but he's very polite when he spoke to me here, and I don't know if he's disturbing those sheep or whether they've just been put into the field next to the woods. Because if they are in that field, then given the state of that fence, we're likely to end up with a woodland full of sheep before nightfall. So I really hope they're on the other side of the river being disturbed by an angler.
I hope that's the case. I didn't see any vehicles going into the field, like the farmer, to let them through, so I think we're safe.
It's a weird one, because when I go into the woods here, with the ground being so damp, that I don't always know what I'm quite looking at, because all those sheep tracks that are in there from those 3 ewes that have just escaped from agriculture and now just overwintering in this woodland. I'm looking at some of the prints on the ground. I'm thinking, is that deer? Could that be deer? Because we haven't got any deer in this corner of northeast Wales, really, apart from there's some fallow, I think they are, over on the other side of the river.
Yeah, over towards the coast more.
Yeah, the other side of the other river. And in theory, there could be deer here. And there are muntjac on the other side of the hill, but just neither of them have got to this corner of the valley yet. And I keep looking at these sheep tracks, because I can tell the difference between a sheep track and a deer track, but I'm so used to seeing these 2 little pointy curved prints next to each other that one day that is going to be deer, and I won't immediately notice because I'll just think it's sheep.
Yeah, until we know that there's no sheep left in this woodland, it's going to be difficult to really do that, because your mind's going to start just blanking them out in the background, isn't it? Yeah, looking for tracks is a
it just forms part of the background noise.
Yeah.
But I don't know, it is weird how few deer we have here, given how high those numbers are elsewhere. I mean, particularly over in England and over to the south and the east. But I don't know, even the other week in Cornwall, we saw more deer there alongside the M5 than we have done in the last 5 years being in North Wales.
Yeah.
And I've lived here, 15 years? And you're...
Yeah, I'm about the same, yeah. Yeah, I think I think I moved to North Wales a couple of years after you. Yeah, so I've not seen, the only deer I've seen are those ones over near the coast, like you say. It is mad that we don't have more of a population, because there is habitat here for them. You know, there's great expanses of woodland and fields and edges, and it's not like it's inhospitable. No,
and it's perfect cover for it, and it's just amazing that there aren't more deer here. It just shows, I think, that there are more people willing to control and actually quite keen to control deer, because it provides hunting opportunity and it provides a source of meat if that's what they're interested in. Although, to be perfectly honest, I think there are more people who want to shoot deer than want to eat deer, maybe.
I think, well, yeah,
I would say so. If they have the option of doing either, particularly around here. Did you see the photo that Scottish gamekeepers shared on, I think it was on their Twitter feed, or X, or what the hell we're calling it now?
Was this the one about the proposed new deer management kind of obligation that the Scottish government are trying to put through? They were doing a consultation back in March, was it?
Well, yeah, so what was it? It was last year there was the vote to lift the restrictions or change the restrictions on deer seasons on certain species, or particularly for culling of hinds, and when you can kill deer of either sex.
Yeah.
And the reasoning for that all seems to be around reducing deer numbers drastically.
It does.
Why those deer numbers need to be reduced is, it seems to be, and this is my personal opinion based on looking at things, it seems to be that it's all to do with forestry. It's all to do with planting trees and the effects that browsing deer have on the regeneration of those woodlands, on the growth of those trees. But is it going to be the same impact on a Sitka spruce plantation that's being planted on a carbon grant or for carbon credits versus natural restoration of a woodland with rowan and birch and oak and other things? I suspect the rules are intended to change things for the Sitka spruce plantation.
It's to protect those carbon credits and that biodiversity offsetting type scheme that they'll have going on with those Sitka spruce, won't it? I suspect, rather than trying to bring back Caledonian rainforests and things. Yeah.
I'm always a slightly cynical one that, where does the money go? What is the financial incentive for this? People who really, really want to do something for an ethical reason rarely get the opportunity to do it in government or in a position of power. Often there's money involved, and I suspect that might be... It's just business at the end of the day. But the photo that was shared, and I think they lost... It was taken down off their account, and then it got reinstated and then possibly got taken down again, was culled hinds, very heavily pregnant hinds, because of the time of year they're being culled. And now with the likelihood of these deer restriction orders or compulsory
the deer management national recovery orders or something, natural recovery orders, I think, maybe. DMNROs. Bit of a mouthful. And they're all, like you say, they're extending the season for hinds, aren't they? Or talking of it.
Or even removing it overall. I mean, this is the sort of thing that if we were a real podcast, we would have all the facts and figures there. You go and listen to the Basque one if you want a proper podcast that tells you all of this. I get really uncomfortable with this office-based legislation based on spreadsheets for something which is really a cultural thing, it's a human thing, it's a wildlife natural systems thing, but it is being treated as if you're trying to change the numbers of items in a warehouse.
I was going to say it's just a game of numbers. They have got some sort of Excel spreadsheet, number crunching data thing that says, right, we need to reduce the population in this area by X amount. And the best way to do that is to kill this many, or to cull, I should say, this many hinds, this many stags, or basically this many males, this many females, to prevent the population from growing and becoming more of an issue. But like you say, they could still have those targets in place without changing the seasons, really. It's like there's two separate movements happening at the same time, because with the targets that they're setting, they're putting the onus on landowners, I believe. This is my understanding of it. Again, it's not the exact facts and figures, but they're putting the onus on landowners to ensure that the population in the area is managed as Scottish Government and Nature Scot see fit.
So someone in Edinburgh-based or office-based is trying to impose a landscape-level solution on an individual landowner. Because the deer don't know whose land they're on. No,
they don't. And if the person doesn't do what has been imposed, what this order says, then they can be fined, which seems unfair in so many ways. Really.
When I've spoken to people and friends up there, it seems to be that a good portion of the problem here is the communication or lack of. How has this been sold? Not even sold to the landowners. It's been given as an instruction of, you must do this or you're going to get fined. For the benefit, I've no idea who that was.
Dunno. But they were friendly enough, it seems.
Yeah, we're getting a nice beep there. It's being managed for the benefit of a chosen goal that wasn't necessarily voted for either.
Yeah, because there was a consultation, but these consultations often don't.
As we found
It's
in
difficult because I know I've been part of nature organisations, mostly charities, and consultations come through and they're always pushed out on social media by conservation charities or the relevant charity or organisation or just people who have a bit of a following in that field, and they push out, there's this consultation going on, you need to respond to it, and that way voices will get heard, which is great. But you have to wonder, when they get thousands and thousands of responses, who's going through those and really taking into account what they say?
Yeah, somebody from the
yeah.
shooting world, from a shooting organisation in Wales here, put it to me as there'll be a consultation, and then they'll use that as an excuse to do what they were going to do anyway.
Yeah.
As a very, which you could say is a very cynical approach to it, but it does seem to be what happens again and again.
I was going to say it's a hypothesis that keeps getting proven almost.
It is, and the deer, there are undoubtedly effects of the deer browsing on those trees. I mean, you can see it in areas. Put deer fencing up, keep the deer out of that area. Trees on one side of the fence, trees not on the other side of the fence. Yeah. But the fencing itself is a lot of work.
Yeah.
And it does have other wildlife effects.
It does.
It
does.
The only thing it doesn't really affect is bird life. Every other sort of
any other
mammals.
mammal.
Yeah.
Any other mammal. And and in Scotland you've also got things like, we don't need to go too far into it, but because of their access rights in Scotland, there's problems with enclosing areas with that as well and stopping people from getting through.
Yeah.
And if you put gates in, then gates aren't necessarily going to stay closed.
Yeah.
And yeah.
When you go to a glen that is under that kind of management and you have some solid deer fencing there, even though, well, I have the right to be on this side of the fence, I have the right to be on that side of the fence, I can walk either side of it. But realistically, this 8-foot high fence is a barrier to travel.
Yeah.
And I've got to walk up and down until I find a gate or one of those
big ladder stiles or something.
There's huge ladder stiles that tower over the fence. When I was up in Knoydart with the other podcast last November? October, November, one or the other.
It was last year.
October, I think it was. And just watching these fairly big chunks of deer running around there.
Yeah.
You could really see the effects of the brand new deer fencing there. We briefly talked to one of the keepers, I suppose one of the stalkers there, about it, but you could see the effects of that investment of the fencing and what keeping the deer out has done to that landscape. And depending on how you frame it, there are benefits to keeping those deer off the landscape, but that management can't be an instruction from somebody with an ideological view about this is how a landscape should be.
No. This
is the budget. We've run the numbers and it should be this. You've run the numbers, but somebody still has to go out and do it.
Yeah.
And euphemistic words like control and management and stuff like that aren't helpful either, because we need to control these deer numbers. We need to manage these deer numbers. No. You need to send somebody out to go and take a life. You need to send somebody out with a skill set, with a good skill set, to be able to get out onto the ground, to be able to find those deer, to be able to find the right shot, to shoot it in a place that means that it is safe, that it is safe for everyone involved, it's safe for the other users of the hill. You've got to be able to extract that deer from that place, you've got to be able to do something with it, you've got to be able to do it in a way that means you can convert some of it back into a valuable product, although the value of venison compared to the time and effort and the skill set that's required into getting it to the table is disproportionate. So again, opinion, but I don't think these things are being taken into account.
I don't think so either. I'm with you on this, and I saw that the Gamekeepers Welfare Trust were getting involved as well because of the impact that the change in the season on female deer was going to have potentially, particularly on contracted stalkers.
Yeah.
So these are stalkers who are hired in to control a deer population. They're not people who have chosen to go. They've not paid to go on a stalk. They're
it's not
working.
recreational.
This is their job.
Yeah.
Um,
They're
and
professional hunters.
Professional hunters, yeah, trained hunters. They have put a lot of money, a lot of time into their job. Basically, they're very skilled people. But if they're given a target, and I mean, if you've had a winter like the one we've just had, where it's been very wet, it's been very cold, it's been difficult conditions, you wouldn't necessarily come across as many deer because the conditions are tough for them too. So you would be hunting as late as you could when conditions were potentially getting a bit better. But that means you've got greater likelihood of coming into contact, of shooting pregnant does, and dealing with the fact that you've then got to, as you say, you don't shoot a deer and then leave it there.
No.
You shoot a deer and then you have to extract it, you have to go through all the processing, and that would be really difficult on mental health.
And if somebody's been told their entire life, if you're from certain communities, or if you've been at least grown up with it in your professional life and your time working on the hill, these rules are sacrosanct. You don't do these things at this time of year because of this. There are these ethical rules which we abide by. They are set in law as well.
Yeah.
Until the law changes, then you have to do it anyway. Otherwise, you're going to get fined or sacked.
Yeah.
That is completely bonkers.
It is completely bonkers. It's horrible. It's really horrible that that's the way that it's going.
Yeah. So if you've been listening to this and you're sort of wondering, you want to learn more about it, we're going to put some links in the show notes. I think
we will.
If you go over to the Wild Food People website, their podcast notes are on there as well, on the accompanying posts, so you can read on that for yourself and read more about this subject, because these things sort of pass through as headlines, but there's still people involved at the end of the day. There's people and animals, and it's killing, and it's strange. If there was a sudden drive changing a law to make it so you had to sell a minimum number of stalking days per year, each estate had to sell so many stalking days per year to American dentists to come over here and shoot trophy animals here, and you have to do a minimum number they have to sell every year, and they have to sell it for this, and they have to get as many people in to shoot it, there would be outrage. There would be on social media, in the press, just like there is for trophy hunting and management now. There would be absolute outrage. But because it's government instructed, and it's
backed up by Nature Scots and other kind of forestry, woodland planting organisations.
And people aren't doing it for recreation. It's not blood sports, as some would call it. It's not done in that way. You got to wonder, the difference in reactions you're likely to get, is that because what do people actually care about? Is it the killing, or is it the fact somebody might be enjoying themselves whilst doing it?
That's an interesting thought.
Yeah, people care less about the killing, really. They care more that somebody might have paid a lot of money to enjoy doing it.
Yeah. That's I don't have a comeback for that, really.
Well,
well, because I'm with you. It's totally true, because there's, not for this podcast, but there's a lot of complexities behind trophy hunting and things as well.
Yeah, behind how it fits into an ecological management, and
how it fits into the local economy in places like Africa, and
So it's interesting when you compare it to something like Trendy Wild Foods in Borough Market.
Yeah, it is. Well, also just something different, like killing plants, basically, because that's what
that's acceptable.
Some foraging is.
Yeah. Eventually, all foraging involves a death of something green.
Yeah, or at least
brown.
Maiming, really, because a lot of things you don't necessarily dig up the entire plant, but you still take part of it, and you've taken leaves away, which are the plant's way of making food. So
because there's well, Borough Market has always been, so Borough Market, middle of London. Under the arches there.
Have you been?
I have been a few times, yeah.
What's it like? Because I've never been, and I kind of want to go, but London isn't one of my chosen travel destinations generally.
You get a nosebleed if you go south of Birmingham. It's now trendy.
Yeah. I gather that.
There's a couple of good really good foodie areas with some really good butchers in there, and lots of places in Devon and Dorset and Somerset traipsing their wares into town
Right.
to sell.
Okay.
And for years there was a stall right in the middle that I think it was basically a massive farm shop, but they had their meat from the farm and other produce from the farm, vegetables, and then they also had foraged items. So they had wild garlic when it was in season, sometimes berries, often mushrooms.
Yeah.
I've been there.
Big draw there.
There always something wild there, although I think some of it was just other people were selling directly to them, and
it was being brought. Yeah. It wasn't from.
It's amalgamation of other places. Yeah. And now there's what you see more of. Although I haven't been there for a few years now because of COVID and just not liking it. Cities, that is. What you see more of is people making things, so value-added goods, so jams and pickles and sauces and infused drinks of one type or another.
Yep.
Using wild items.
Yeah, because I looked on YouTube, just out of interest. I thought maybe there's like a walk-around video of Borough Market or something, but most of the top hits on YouTube for Borough Market are about the street food and these like must-haves that have become Instagram or TikTok massive things. And I mean, I don't remember there being many foraged items within that street food. I didn't really look at too many of the videos because I didn't have time at that point, but it wasn't what I was expecting to come across, because the most that I've encountered about Borough Market, because of my background and what I look at, has been about the fact that you can buy foraged things there, and that people bring in kilos of mushrooms to sell at Borough Market. And
it's with our work, and we work with brands that use wild ingredients in their products, mostly for food or food and beverages. One of the things that comes up within that is the legality of where it's sourced from. Because you have the Theft Act and you have the Wildlife and Countryside Act, both of which have an impact on that. So do you have permission to take items from there for commercial purposes? Is it a species that you're allowed to harvest at all? Is it a landscape or an area from which you're allowed to harvest things at all? So if it's a triple SI, you cannot take things, whether it is for commercial sale or personal use, for example. But that knocks out most upland areas where bilberries and things like that are collected. So it is something when we talk with clients about that, and we say, okay, so if you want to do this as we urge you to do, legally and ethically and sustainably, these are the things you need to be aware of. These are the quantities. If you want to get this quantity of gorse flowers, this quantity of bilberries, and you're collecting it from that area, these are the things you need to have squared away legally to do. And then something that comes back is, but there's a bloke in Borough Market selling it. Yeah. And what you have to say a few times is, yeah, but it's nicked, or yeah, it's illegal. Yeah. It's just because it's for sale doesn't prevent it being an illegally harvested item. I don't mean any of the stalls and things that we've alluded to there. I absolutely have no idea where it comes from. This is that's a completely neutral statement in regards to them. But I know that it's and you see the same thing in food festivals and other places. There's always somebody selling some wild garlic something. Yeah.
Or gin, which has got elderflowers or berries foraged from the farm's hedgerows, and
yeah, it's a great selling point.
It is.
We work with businesses on that selling point, but to do it 100% legally is very, very difficult. And I think the trendiness of it and the perception of the lifestyle and perception of the source of it, and it's forage, so it must be better. I was like, well, no, it could be farmed just outside the M25 and it would have lower food miles, and it might be better for the planet because you don't know where that has come from. But it's the perception of wild, just like wild swimming and wild camping and wild everything. I saw wild cycling the other day.
Wild cycling?
Yeah, it's just mountain biking. But
Okay.
it's wild cycling now.
Okay,
Anyway,
moving on from that.
you don't... The trendiness of it, I think, is more of a factor. And it's kind of a lifestyle thing. There was something in... I think it was in The Spectator last month.
I think I saw that.
Mr. Galbraith Paddy Galbraith was quoted in there.
He was quoted, yes, yeah.
Yeah.
It was talking about how...
I'm going to bring it up because they called him something. Hang on.
Whilst you're looking for that, it's a strange one because it's become trendy in restaurants as well.
Yeah.
And a lot of restaurants you'll find, particularly at this time of year, so we're in beginning of May now, but even in kind of from March through to the end of May, you will see wild garlic included on the menus of quite a lot of restaurants because it's a relatively easy thing to forage in quantity, to find, and to use. You know, it's a familiar flavour, and chefs just do seem to love it, and it's a great thing to get people more connected with nature through their food if that's a way that actually speaks to them, because connecting with nature in your natural environment, if you live in a city, isn't necessarily easy. But I do wonder whether it's kind of... Is it making foraging become too popular?
I can't say anything about wild food media or foraging media because I'm saying this on a bloody podcast.
Yeah.
But, okay, I found the quote.
Okay.
Instagram has changed the game, says the nature writer and wild garlic picker Patrick Galbraith. People love the foraging aesthetic. Now, of all the things that they could have picked up on for Patrick for that, I don't think that's terrible, actually.
No. No.
Hello, Patrick. The social media element is a big part of this because it doesn't... If it matters less what you're doing and more that the perception of others is that you're doing it, then there's likely to become a problem because you're doing it to get the image, to get the reel, to get the social media love, to get the internet points for doing that thing, which means your value to it is attached to the app, to your phone, to the image, not to the landscape, not to the plant, not to the species, not to the food. And I don't say this as a value judgment of, well, I'm better than you, I'm more authentic than you, but it's, would you go and do that if you weren't taking a photo of it? Would you go, if you would still go and do that activity, if you would still go and collect wild garlic every single year, if you would go and pick all the heads, if you would do salads with the young leaves, if you would do pesto with the mature leaves, if you would chop the stem and use it as a spring onion replacement, would you do that and carry on doing that every single year or regularly and tell nobody about it, not write about it, not take a photo of it, not share it with anyone on the internet? I think you could filter out two categories of people there quite quickly.
Yeah.
And if you could still do this thing, but you couldn't tell anyone about it. You couldn't tell strangers or friends that you were doing it and get the perception that you are. Would you still do it? And if you wouldn't, then you care more about the aesthetic than you do about the thing.
Yeah. Yeah, you've hit the nail on the head there. You really have. It's...
Don't tell people I'm right, because I'll just get an opinion about myself and that doesn't go well.
It may be too late for that, Richard. Yeah, it's tricky, and I feel like as well, with there being such a rise in this Instagram version of foraging, social media version of foraging almost, it's hard to get across in a short reel the actual effects and the impacts of your foraging on that particular local environment and what could be the effects of that.
Yeah.
And it's difficult because it's one of those things that we evolved from hunter-gatherers. We evolved from people foraging and basically getting all of their food from the wild. This is before farming existed as a thing. And so it's something that does actually feel very natural to most people when they do it, because it hits a part of our brain that...
Yeah, you're hardwired to enjoy this.
You're hardwired for this. This is why we are here today. because, the ones who were good at it survived and carried on breeding, basically. So that is ingrained in every single human on the planet. So once you get started at it, you can't help but enjoy it. But also, because we've become so ingrained into modern life and understanding how to live in the world that we have now, for a lot of people, it's tricky. And also it's a case of when humans lived in that way, there was possibly less of us, and there was more green space, and there was more of these things around. So whatever we do in these environments now, we just have to be a little bit more careful so that we don't decimate or put out of balance something that seems to be working, as it were.
Yeah, I think Does
that make sense?
Yeah, no, that does make sense. And there's a continuation of that as well. When something is sold as either implied or it just explicitly said, this is what this thing is. This thing is sold as a green, wonderful, natural activity, connects you to nature. The benefits are only ever sold because it is sold as an activity you can buy into, you can plug into as a temporary thing. When you have... you don't talk about the negatives of it. You don't talk about, well, these are the good points. These are the things that are good for you. These are the things that may be good for the environment from it. These are all the negatives, and then you make a decision yourself. People rarely do that. I mean, we do it on courses, on our foraging courses, and I do have to be very careful about how I'm framing that because, hello and welcome. Right, you've all come to this woodland. So here's all the damaging effects of foraging and over foraging and commercial foraging. It's not a thing to start the course with, but if something is sold as always being a positive and the negative is not even mentioned, it's going to be very difficult for people to self-regulate.
Yeah.
It's going to be very difficult for people to moderate their behaviour, moderate what their actions. They're not going to be able to. They're just going to say, well, I won't take too much. What is too much? If you can't tell people what too much is, if you can't tell people what the negative effects of soil compaction in these areas that prevents the mycelium from spreading for mushrooms, which seems to be a bigger impact of commercial foraging for mushrooms rather than actually collecting the mushrooms themselves.
Yeah.
You've got the impact of just over harvesting or harvesting at the wrong time of year.
Yep.
You were saying earlier today about if you take all the leaves from these plants, from these bulb-based plants, then they can't photosynthesize.
No. So this is actually a thing that I've seen it come across more from the States and from people who are foraging ramps in the States. So ramps are kind of like their version of wild garlic.
It's another allium, isn't it?
It's another allium. It's also called wild leek.
Are they the same as three-cornered leeks?
No, they're not. They're a different species.
Right.
They're still a something at the end. They're allium trichocum or something.
Are they trichocum as versus?
But I don't think they are the same thing as what we have over here. But they are very similar. They're in the same family. They grow in the same sort of way. They're a little bulb. They look a bit like a spring onion. With ramps, because again, foraging has become more popular in the US as well, it seems. Or again, maybe this is part of a social media echo chamber that I'm just getting wild food things thrown in my face all the time. But I've seen quite a few people on there saying that for ramps, if you're harvesting ramp leaves, that you should only take one from each bulb, basically. I mean, if you see wild garlic growing in the UK, it generally just looks like it's a carpet of loads of leaves. It's growing kind of like grass, but on a bigger, glossier scale. Whenever I've seen photos of ramps growing, they seem to be slightly more individual, a bit more obvious. But a lot of people say you should just take one leaf from each plant and not from every single plant in an area, because the way that those bulbs can grow and can spread further is to photosynthesize and make food, make energy, and pull that into their system, as well as taking nutrients up from the soil. They need both. That's what plants need. And so if you take all the leaves off one plant, then you're stopping it from being able to photosynthesize and make sugars, which is the most important bit in that way. Have you found out this thing about species?
Working on it. It is the thing about self-moderation and just how you do it. It is it's very difficult. It's like when you say to a child, "Be careful." They're doing a thing for the first time, and you say, "Be careful." It's like, well, they don't know what careful is in that context. They don't know how to do
No.
those things. Like, be careful near fire. Why? They've never been burned yet. They haven't been set on fire yet.
Yeah.
You don't then just also let them wander into a bonfire and say, "Well, I told you to be careful."
No.
So you have to be honest with people about what the risks are, what the outcomes are, the positive and negative outcomes from doing something. Right, I've got your things.
You've got the species.
Well, ramps are Allium trichocum.
Okay. Do you know what three-cornered leek is?
Three-cornered leek is Allium. I hate Latin names. I work with Latin names day in, day out, and I still hate them. Allium triquetrum.
Okay, so they are different.
Allium trichocum and Allium triquetrum. And there's few-flowered garlic as well, which is Allium paradoxum, I think.
Okay.
Which is another one.
Yeah.
Which is from Asia, I think.
Okay. We only have wild garlic up here in North Wales.
Yeah, just like
So
we've only got
that's the
proper
one that-
bluebells. We don't really have hybrid bluebells or Spanish bluebells.
No, only if it's near areas where there's gardens and garden waste or cross-pollination, because people have planted Spanish bluebells back there or something. But
Yeah.
yeah.
It's quite an interesting thing when we go to... It sounds stupid, but I like going out to the southern counties and going into England and seeing like, oh, here's this invasive species I always see people talking about. We never have that. We don't have that here.
Yeah, it's weird. It's really interesting. It's just going to a different habitat that looks so... Because North Wales is quite unique in its feel, its appearance, its habitats, its everything. And it's just, yeah.
I know you can't sell game meat, like wild game meat in the US.
Yeah.
But can you sell wild plants?
Yes. Well, there was a news article the other week which was about ramps, and it was this guy who farms up in the Catskills, which is in New York State, and he...
I think it's where Jimmy DiResta lives.
Oh, is it?
Yeah,
Okay.
the YouTube guy who makes things.
Very random thing, but a TV show I was watching a while back, there was like a big holiday camp up in the Catskills where loads of people from the city went in the summer for like 8 weeks at a time.
So is New
to
York's...
get away from the heat of New York City.
Okay.
So, because I think it's up in the mountains, it's the Catskill Mountains.
Right.
So.
Anyway,
this guy, farmer, he's specialises in kind of quite unique plants and different flavours, and he's worked really closely with some chefs who are famous over in the States. And he also forages ramps. The wording of the article led me to believe that he didn't forage the ramps on his farm.
okay.
But I don't know what the legality is exactly with
public
that.
lands or state
Possibly
lands or
public
something.
lands or state lands or something. And then he would sell them in the local farmers market. And he'd been doing this for kind of 35 years. And then there was outrage, is how it was described.
It's always outrage.
I know. By New York University students and other kind of college students, that he was selling ramps, because he was selling the whole plant. He was digging them up and selling them in quite huge quantity. But he's been doing it for such a long time. He learned from a woodsman, and he says that when ramps disperse their seed, that it sits on the top of the soil and it needs to get underground in order to be able to germinate. So he says when they go out and they dig up the ramp bulbs, that at the same time, that's allowing the seeds to get into the soil.
You're inverting the soil.
Yeah, so the next generation of ramps can come through. And given that he had been doing this for such a long time, I kind of believe him that the way that he's doing it is sustainable.
Yeah, either he's lying very well or...
Yeah, because if not, he should have run out of ramps at some point, unless he's spreading around a massive area. But I found it interesting that it said about these students having this outrage, but then there was no quotes from anybody. There was no kind of further thing. There was just a couple of news articles about it that saying that he or appeared to be upset by the fact that he was being accused of killing the earth, I think was the phrase. that was used. So
I bet that's come off a placard or a sign. You never know what to do with those stories like that, because some people are professionally outraged, or at least recreationally so. But some people are also damaging the planet, or damaging an ecosystem, or doing something that someone else would genuinely perceive as being negative.
yeah,
So the worst part in there is, well, the worst part, not of all possible outcomes, but you do wonder how there managed to be a story out of it.
yeah. I mean, I kind of.
Was it just somebody shouted at somebody else and they shouted back across the farmer's market, and now we have an article out of it just because a journalist happened to be there?
I don't know. I don't think it was quite like that. It was because he wrote a whole. He basically wrote a rebuke against what they were saying. So I don't. Just strikes me as weird that it's like it's pictured as these students had an issue with this guy selling ramps, and so now he's come back at them with saying that the way that he does it is sustainable and fine and everything. And I don't know. Like you say, you can never really know unless you've actually been there with the person and seen what they're doing. And
it's
everything.
Subjective as well.
It is very subjective, yeah.
But
yeah.
we're talking about it as well now, which makes it even worse.
That's true.
Something I did see, which was just mad. Visitors to Richmond Park have been filmed trying to force antlers off deer. So Richmond Park, one of the royal parks, London, you can go in there and wander and walk your dog. And
it's full of deer.
Is that the Fenton one?
Yes, I believe it is.
Yes.
I believe it is the Fenton one.
So unless you were on the internet at the right time, this might have passed you by completely, the Fenton phenomenon. But there were a whole set of dogs named Fenton afterwards.
It became popular.
We'll link the video.
It's
brilliant. I've heard of this, of people, because deer shed antlers
every year.
Every year, go through a cycle. They grow an antler, they shed it, will grow a pair, and that's even a hobby. Some people go around, they hunt for shed antlers.
Yes.
On public lands in the States. I've got friends who go out and do that. Mm-hmm. And I've just found it here. You just find antlers randomly.
Yeah, if you're in the right place.
Yeah, I've got some at home. I've got one that's on a handle for a fire steel, for a bushcraft fire steel, which is made. I found that shed on the top of a mountain in Cumbria, the Lake District. Annoyingly, they haven't put the footage of people trying to wrestle.
So I've looked for that footage actually, and I could not find it anywhere.
Oh.
It does not appear to be anywhere, and it's footage from locals. It's claimed.
Locals filming or locals doing the grabbing?
Locals filming tourists, essentially, is how I read it on a tweet somewhere. But there was no video, and I haven't seen any of this video footage, but it was people apparently trying to pull, like actually somehow touching these deer and getting hold of the antlers and trying to pull them off.
I mean, they are pretty habituated to humans, so it's getting up to them isn't an unreasonable expectation. Whether you should or not is different, but that it's possible.
But is not holding on to their antlers like challenging them to erupt, basically?
I want to know the thought process of somebody. Is it somebody who knows that they are going to shed and they're just thinking, well, that's nearly ready to shed, I'll see if I can grab hold of it? Or is it just somebody who knows nothing about it, is looking at that antlered animal going, I bet they're detachable. I bet I could have some of that.
I don't know which would be worse.
Or just like, I bet a bit of leverage and I can crack that antler off that deer's head.
Maybe, because it doesn't say that there was footage of people trying to saw them off. It's not like what poachers do to rhinos and elephants and things. It's like they're trying to pull them off. They're literally trying to pop them out or something.
Like they're Lego.
I mean, maybe they were just Lego. Maybe they were just trying to Maybe they were trying to fight with the deer. Maybe they weren't trying to get hold of the antlers. They just were, I don't know, doing a dare, trying to get Insta famous or something.
I'm going to go in here and I'm going to fight with this deer.
Yeah.
Hold my beer.
I've heard of stupider things.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I don't.
Okay, well...
Either way.
I remember on the article it said if the police have urged you, if you do see somebody trying to force the antlers off deer, to call 101, call the non-emergency number, which I'd like to hear that call, how that call goes.
I would too.
You know, how do you word it? No, it's trying to force the antlers off a deer. Yes, I know it sounds stupid. No, they are doing it now. Yeah, no. How does that work?
I wonder where that sits in the law as well.
It's a very...
It's probably something that's not really been thought of before.
To interfere with a deer? I know it's an offence to interfere with a pelican in a royal park.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking. Is there maybe something to do with the deer as well? Because if the deer there technically belong to the crown or whoever it
depends
is.
if they're park deer or wild deer.
I'm not sure.
As I don't think wild deer, I don't think anybody owns.
No, they wouldn't if they were wild deer. But that's why I'm wondering if they're park deer.
Does the king own the deer? Interfering with a king's deer, is that...
Maybe that's something for a bit more research.
Is it an offence to interfere with a king's deer? Right. I don't even know how to start
I think
with
it depends how you're interfering with them as well, probably.
If you are interested in some of the law and some of the ethical stuff around sourcing your own wild food, particularly here in the UK, we've got some articles up on the website from the last few weeks. We've got one up on digging up wild garlic, what you can do with wild garlic roots, but also is it lawful to and is it ethical to dig up wild garlic, and when can you do it, and so on. We've also got one there just updating people on the rules for fishing for bass, sea bass, or just bass, depending on who you're asking. I'm not starting that debate off again, but it is the pelagic fish out in the sea around the coast here, and the rules about when you can and can't, when the close season is. We're recording this in May, and hopefully I'm going fishing on Wednesday. It depends if Crab Boat Stew can get the boat in the water on Wednesday, because I had a message from Crab Boat Stew today saying that the boat is now in pieces all over his driveway as he tries to find an oil leak.
Oh no.
But he's gone past the point of no return, so now he has to sit with it and until it's reassembled. So
oh no.
I think we are going in the water. It depends, just yeah.
But it depends whether you're going to get wet or not then.
2 fish each, more than 42 centimetres in length. Not less than, more than 42 centimetres in length, but hopefully sea bass for tea on Wednesday. Great. Or bass, depending on what you're calling it. We've run a couple of coastal foraging courses, our shorter coastal foraging course, which all details on our website, but held on a beach in North Wales, sort of northwest Wales, but it's on the southern coast of the Clean Peninsula. We cover most of the edible species that are available on shore below the high tide mark during that course. We have a little bit of, not nerves, but a little bit of stress.
I'd call it nerves, to be honest. We always have this thing of, what's the beach going to look like this year? Yeah, really, because that's the thing. It's after winter storms.
Yes, it's a very sandy beach with rocks, so it's exposed to some big storms, and the sand moves around a lot.
It really does, and it's in an estuary, so there's also kind of mud underneath the sand.
There's tidal mud with sand on top.
Tidal mud with sand on top, and then the sand gets shifted around by the winter storms, by the tides, etc. And so you never know. Each year, the first course that we have.
And the first course this year, or this season, half of the sand had gone, or 2/3 of the sand had gone, down to a depth that I've not seen there in over 10 years of running courses there. And, well, put it this way, I found a piece of 16mm camera film.
Oh, you did, didn't you?
Sticking up out of the mud, which means that hasn't been there. That's probably 30 years old at least, unless it was a real retro camera enthusiast. It was probably put there when 16mm film was readily available, which means it was before the mid-1990s at the latest.
Wow.
And at the same depth, further along the beach, there were some huge, in comparison to what we have there now, mussel shells, mitolus, edulus, the common mussel, not
Blue mussel.
blue mussel.
Blue mussel. Or common mussel. Yeah.
Huge mussel shells there that about twice the size of the ones that are currently you'll find on that beach. And it makes you think, well, that's what was there. And if that, say it's on the same depth, so is that 30 years ago more? Have we now got smaller mussels there? It's probably something we'll revisit in another episode, but it was just something that I can't get out of my head. It's just the size of these mussel shells that were there.
They were huge. Like I've only been going there for, I don't know, 5 years, but I have never seen a mussel that big there.
No.
Even in the kind of remote bits where you have to wade up to your waist or swim out to, there's still not mussels of that size on that particular bit of beach.
Something in the environment overall has changed. Is it the water quality? Is it the nutrients? Is it something in the action of the waves upon it? Is it people? Is it people basically collecting the healthier mussels and the larger mussels, and nothing there can get up to size?
Maybe.
Because we found this in
not.
Cornwall last week or the week before. Went back home there briefly, and looking at you could tell the difference between areas that tourists, well, I say tourists, I blame tourists, it could be locals as much, people could easily get to.
Yeah, the accessible spots.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The mussels there were smaller, much smaller, than the areas where people could not get to easily. And you just think, well, if you give them the regeneration rate there for those mussels.
Yeah. I mean, they were there in numbers.
Yeah.
They were there in numbers, but they were all small.
Yeah.
And none of them were, we're getting that big.
So you can read about some of that on our social media. If you go to @wildfoodpeople, you see all the stuff there. 3 things to do this week.
I would say, I mean, I know we've talked about it a bit this episode, but we are coming to the end of wild garlic season in the UK.
The last third of it.
The last third of it, yeah. So if you're down south, you'll be a bit further along. If you're further north, you will be not as far along as we are here. We're kind of fairly middle in quite a lot of ways.
We always say there's a 6-week difference between Cornwall and the middle of Scotland in terms of season.
But if you were planning on doing something with wild garlic, or you haven't yet been out, I would say get out as soon as you can. Beech leaves are another thing like that. We're coming to kind of the end of spring, the beginning of summer almost. It's
a weird one, depending on the species you're talking about for any one of those. But
yeah,
it's because spring really is when the frosts stop and the leaves start appearing for us, at least for the forager. And we are entering the point now where things we're not seeing stuff appearing for the first time. What we're seeing are things getting to the point in their growth where there are flowers starting to develop or that kind of thing. But the leaves have been out for weeks. And beech is one of those. Beech is in beech trees. Was it Fagus sylvatica?
Fagus sylvatica, yeah, common beech.
Yeah, and if you come along to one of our courses, and if you were to come along to our course this coming Saturday, one of the first species we'll talk about on that course is beech. And we'll get to try some of the leaves, and it's a good time of year to eat the leaves, and they are quite good in smaller quantities, but they are good. But one of our favourite things to do is to make a liqueur, just a beech noyau.
Yeah.
Noyau. Spelt Noyau. Despite my surname, I am not French. Noyau.
Yeah, it's really simple to make.
Yeah.
It requires some gin, some beech leaves, some sugar, and some brandy. And there is actually a recipe on our website if you're looking for quantities for making that. And we will be making, well, we are making more. We have some on the go right now. And it's got a really interesting flavour. It's quite herbal.
Well, noyau is it's kind of French for kernel or core, like centre.
Yeah.
And it's normally, a noyau is normally a liqueur made from the stones of fruits.
Yeah, or the nut kernels, so
Yes.
almonds and things, as well as, cherry stones and, yeah.
So there is the flavour that's in there is always slightly almondy anyway because of the cyanide content of those stones.
Yeah.
But with beech leaves, there is no harmful compound within there that really transfers through. So it's a much more subtle flavour.
It is. I think the thing with the Neue as well is that element of brandy within it.
Yeah, to finish it.
Yeah.
It is warming, but it goes down very, very nicely.
It does.
Fantastic colour as well. It's this colour of late afternoon sunlight through leaves.
It is. Yeah.
In a bottle. But the third thing you can go and do this week is if you're down on the coast, particularly the southern coast of England, the western coast, or up the western coast of Wales, and then about as far as Cumbria, although I found it in Galloway, is to go and find some rock samphire and go and collect the young tips of rock samphire and either steam them and put them in stir fries or pickle them. So not the whole plant, just the young tips. Rock samphire, despite the name, is completely unrelated to marsh samphire. Marsh samphire is Salicornia europea or Salicornia species, but the Chrysanthemum maritimum is the rock samphire. Looks very different, tastes very different, but also grows right there on the coast. Marsh samphire, as the name implies, is on salt marshes, and it's between the high tide mark and the low tide mark, about midway down. Whereas rock samphire grows up on the rocks and on harbour walls and things, just above the spray zone. So on a tidal zone, you have the high tide mark, then you have sort of the splash zone, which is where waves come up to just at the high tide mark if there's a bit of a slightly rougher water. Then you have sea spray, which hits the zone above that, and then just at the top of that you get rock samphire. So you often see it right at the tops of harbour walls and things. I think if you go to our Instagram, there's some photos from Cornwall last week before, of rock samphire in different places on the harbour walls at Charlestown and down at Town Quay at Foy and other places I know well. But those are the places I always think of with rock samphire. So go and collect some of the young tips. I think John Mushroom, said that rock samphire is either carrots or kerosene. It's sort of the flavour range. And at this time of year, it's definitely more towards the carrots. It tastes like younger carrots, but with a real powerful, almost citric, but not quite kick to it.
Yeah, it has like a sharpness.
Yeah, but it's not a vinegary sharpness. It's not an acidic sharpness. It's
a citric sharpness.
But it's a very difficult one to describe. So it is worth going to do something with. They pickle really well. They go well into stir fries. Don't add too much to it. But yeah, that's your third thing. So where's it going? Go and make as much of the wild garlic as you can.
Yeah, while it's still here.
Make some beech leaf Neue.
I think everybody should do that at least once.
Yes. Even if you don't drink, you'll know somebody who does drink, and they'll appreciate it.
That's true.
And go and find some rock samphire. And if you're in the far north of Scotland, good luck. Ask me. Write to me. I'll try and post you some or something. I think that's it. I think that's it for our episode that we wanted to be about half an hour long, and we've wildly gone past that.
We have.
We run courses. We run foraging courses. There's a range on our website. We're also running different foraging events at different places throughout the year. So we've got some booked in for the summer already. We're appearing at a couple of these sort of revivalist country fair type things.
Yeah.
And we're doing some stuff with a wonderful estate down in the Midlands, which we'll be announcing hopefully in the next few weeks. Really looking forward to doing some things there. They're doing a hell of a lot with the estate and some really interesting things there. So can't wait to tell you about those. But if you go to our website, wildfoodpeople.co.uk, go to the courses there, you'll see all the courses that we have. We can also do private events, and we do bespoke, weird and wonderful things. So if you have an idea, get in touch. We also consult for businesses that use wild food in their and wild ingredients in their products, everything from skincare to gin to restaurants to chocolate bars, all sorts of interesting things that we can't really talk about the specifics of because people pay us money to not talk about them in public. And we are also on social media, so at Wild Food People gets you to us on social media. This looks like a new brand because it is. This is something I've been doing for the last 15 years. as a professional, anything to avoid having a real job, really. But you previously would have seen it under a brand called Original Outdoors. That's been around for a long time. Wild Food People is how we've separated that off and put it off to one side to make it more focus on the wild food element of it, because that's actually what I really enjoy doing. It doesn't mean that if you're with us doing a navigation course or an outdoor safety course or something like that with the other brands, that you won't get the full and rich experience. It's just I really love doing this. If you want to support this podcast and you want to enable us to do things like travel around the country interviewing other people and to be able to access things that we wouldn't normally be able to access, to bring you more stories, to bring you more wild food information, then we have a Patreon set up. If you go to patreon.com and search for Wild Food People, you'll come across us. We've also got links in the show notes, which is all that texty bit in the whatever podcast app. So you'll find links there. It's on our social media as well. And you will also get bonus content there and other things, like when we start running adverts on this podcast, as we inevitably have to with our hosting, you'll get the ad-free versions of the episodes. I think that's it for now.
That is. The only other thing to say is that if you did enjoy this podcast, then if you could please like it, subscribe, and share it with a friend who you think might enjoy it too. And most importantly there as well, if you could leave us a review, that would be amazing, because that's the best way to get it in front of other people. That's the way that podcast apps will push us slightly further up in their algorithm and perhaps show the podcast to people who have similar interests.
Yeah, so if you listen to it sounds like, why would that help? But because it's run on an algorithm, it's basically run automatically. There's not a human saying, okay, we'll push this podcast this week, that podcast this week. The algorithm for, say, Apple Podcasts or Spotify is trying to provide its audience, its customers, with the podcast and the content that matches what they like. So if you like this and you think other people should hear about it or like to hear more of it, then go to whatever app that you listen through. There'll be a review section. Leave us, hopefully a 5-star, but whatever stars you think is correct, and a one-word review. Great, terrible, French, whatever you think sums up your listening experience so far, that will help. Genuinely, that is something, if you wanted to help us, that is one of the best things you could do. Thank you for listening. We'll have another episode coming out soon. If you have any ideas for future content, if you want to be a guest on the show, or if you can suggest a guest for the show, then get in touch with us via the show notes and all the contact information there. But either way, thank you for listening. The Wild Food People podcast was recorded quite literally in the field, within earshot of a chiff-chaff and some very loud sheep. We're also sat next to some lovely bits of lesser celandine. It is a rural and outdoor production.